Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you to those who are here with us on campus and to those of you who are joining us online. My name is Dr. Danita Berg, and I am the director of the English department here at Full Sail University. I'm hosting this session titled How to Succeed in a Collaborative Environment. And I have with me our distinguished alumni, Aaron Cook.
Hello. Thanks.
As well as several of our social sciences instructors. I have Ann Ovison and Laura Harless. And Billy Barnett. So first, we're just going to start off and answer the question, what do we mean by personality as we consider collaboration?
So it's not like, is this person cool or is this person like fun to be around? It's, at least for the purposes of this talk, it's about personality theory. And so I wanted to kind of touch on like true colors and MBTI and dive into the meat. Like, those are really important things to take the time to research and understand. It helps you understand yourself better and be able to more quickly identify your own flaws. It helps you understand the people you work with better so that you can meet them on their terms and become a more approachable person and be able to empathize with people better. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about personality. And if you guys have other thoughts.
I personally love the MBTI myself, and it's one of the things that I teach when it comes to personality theory the most, because it's not complex, and it is something that you can just kind of pick up just a general understanding of and be able to understand yourself as well as how that relates to other people. And it's so important to know your preferences, which is what it measures, as well as the preferences of your teammates, because then you can talk to them on their level and understand what their needs are as well as your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one of the things that we do with our students is we talk about the difference between behavior and personality. And so with personality, it's a whole lot of why we do what we do as opposed to just what we do. So all of the things that you learn in psychology of play are based on why do we do what we do, and we see those as our long-standing things from our personality.
Yeah, great addition. Thank you.
Yeah, we teach our course is a first month that students have to take, and so their first month here on campus, our class actually has built-in team assignments and team projects that they have to work on. So from the very first moment they step on campus, they're kind of immersed in a group work environment.
Cool.
As we learn to work together, how can we learn ways to improve our personality strengths?
So that's again where personality comes in. You can kind of identify, the things that you're succeeding at. I have this mentality of I should always be working on the things I'm the worst at, because why continue to improve something that I'm already really good at? You make so much. Like the level of improvement day over day is so much smaller as you gain proficiency in something. And so to be a more rounded individual and be more competent as a professional in the industry, I focus on the things that I'm the worst at. And part of that is there's this theory out there, the Dunning-Kruger effect, where they look at it's an axis of competence versus confidence. And you find that there's a lot of people who are rather incompetent at something but have a high level of confidence in something. And so when I find myself being like, I got this, I remember that, and I take the moment to be like, do I really though? Like, do I really got this? Like, and there's been times where I think about it and I'm just like, I'll just ask questions just to make sure. And then I start talking to like an art lead or engineering lead or a principal producer and find out that like, oh, no, I did not. I'm glad I asked questions. Because most of the time there's a lot more nuance to things than you might expect at face value. But yeah. And then
No, I was going to say I'm a big proponent of not just knowing your own strengths and abilities, but knowing the strengths of the people on your team. So knowing what everybody is good at, maybe knowing where their areas of growth are, because you're going to be working with people of all different skills and abilities. And I'm kind of like you. I don't want to work at something that I'm already good at.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you've heard the phrase hire your weakness in a lot of industries. Hire people that can fill in the gaps that you have in your own knowledge and skill set to be on your team, because that's what creates a whole team.
And yeah, actually, I think it was Edison that actually hired people. He actually made his people go out and find people that they would not normally talk to. Somebody that was outside of their normal group, and bring them in, because he thought that sharing ideas and gaining ideas from people that you wouldn't normally talk to on the street is a good way to kind of bring creativity. So in a group environment, don't just get around people that you know and people that think exactly like you. Find the person who thinks outside the box. Find the person who says, oh, I never thought of it that way. And so you hire people, or look for people that have completely different ideas than you. And it builds a better team that way.
So I liked what you said earlier about empathy. I think empathy is one of those things that you can always improve on.
Yeah.
And whenever you have an opportunity to work with other people, that ability to self-correct comes from me being able to check myself. Do I have the ability to empathize with others? And do I have that for me? Am I going to go crawl in a corner if what I said didn't come out right? Or am I going to have the resiliency to hear what somebody's saying and take the challenge to improve? So I think empathy is a really big thing of self-improvement.
Yeah, to your point of like the don't go in the corner and like curl up. I had the privilege of getting to meet Troy earlier, and he's got this thing, this saying, "My fault, moving on." We're just like, yep, okay, I messed up. Can we move forward now? And like just owning it really quickly in the moment and just trying to move forward. But yeah, I wanted to come back to your point about the like know your team. That has been like, as a producer, that's the biggest thing for me, is needing to understand where people's strengths and weaknesses are, so that I can make sure that either we're getting a project that I can set them up for success and they can just nail it, or if somebody's like not performing where we would like them to be, sitting down and working with them and trying to understand, why aren't you where we want, what's the shortcoming, and I've usually found that it's like, oh, that's not their wheelhouse, and that's my bad. I shouldn't have put you on that. You're better suited for this kind of work, and adapting the project to my team rather than trying to force them to get something done that isn't their expertise. Yeah.
What advice would you give to students as they start on their first jobs, what they can do to identify and deal with their own personality weaknesses?
Going back to that Dunning-Kruger effect, just knowing where you're at on that curve. There's what's the term for? It's not fields. It's like specific areas of like knowledge.
Like your forte or your...
Yeah, I don't remember. It's not important. But yeah, so there's like these different areas of knowledge and of understanding, and being able to take the time. Like, it takes a lot of self-reflection to sit down, and at least in my opinion, I could be totally wrong, to sit down and think through, like, what am I good at, what am I not good at, and with the Dunning-Kruger effect, please Google it, look it up, and just look at that curve, and think about where you sit on it. If you aren't really confident in something, but you've been at it for a while, that's probably a good thing. I had somebody that I was speaking to earlier today, and she was telling me that she's been really struggling with a lot of self-doubt, and I was like, good, because if you think you got it at this point in the game while you're still a student, something's wrong. Like, you're going to get humbled in a really rough way if that's the mindset that you have. I've been there. It's not fun.
Yeah, something I tell all my students is that I consider myself a learner, just like they are. I mean, the day I stop learning or wanting to learn or being curious about learning something new is just the day I may as well, hang up my hat as a teacher, because I think that it makes me a better teacher, and it also models for my students that kind of yearning to want to know more about something. So never be satisfied with what you know. If you think you're totally at the top of your game in your craft or your skill, guess what? You're not, because somebody else is going to come along and knock you out of the ring. So always strive, and not perfection, but always strive to want to be the best for yourself. And with that comes, always wanting to know as much as you can about something. Find what really interests you. And a lot of that's trial and error. I mean, the way to find out that you're not good at something, honestly, is to just go out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then a lot of times you'll discover, okay, maybe that particular area is not for me, but I'm going to try something else. And then, wow, I really like that other thing I'm doing, and that's what I want to focus on. And then find out as much as you can about that thing and get really good at it. So just, tap into what you're passionate about, what you're most curious about, and always be willing and open to learn.
Yeah.
Never be satisfied, especially when you're getting your first job right out of college. Just, make yourself known as somebody who is open to learning, open to getting constructive feedback. I think that's another really important skill to have as well.
I did not plan on being the empathy guy here. So for me, failure is like the biggest teacher, and so being able to fail and do it really well has been kind of my thing. And so I've learned a whole lot about how do I become a better me, and typically that's by going off and biting off something bigger than I think I can chew, doing it poorly and learning along the way how to do it better. There's a large part of resiliency coming through failure and becoming an expert at the things you're not an expert at. Has the whole hero's journey thing really is a large part of that. And so, don't be afraid to go screw up.
And to touch on a little bit about feedback, being able to take feedback, kind of analyze it, find out what is relevant to you, because you're going to hear feedback and you're going to hear a lot of stuff, and you're going to look at what you've done and say, well, I don't know about that. I kind of like that part of whatever somebody else doesn't like. And that's okay. You don't have to change everything just because somebody says this is wrong. But at the same time, you also want to see how many people are actually saying that. Because if you have your entire base saying this is wrong and you're like, but I love this aspect, then you might want to think about changing it. But be able to take that feedback, analyze it, find out what is relevant to you, what you really do want to change, and how to use it. Because I find so many students they're so in love with what they do, they can't take the feedback, they take it as an assault, and so they don't see the merit in what the feedback is telling them.
Yeah.
So be able to take that, because I know that's something I've had to, because when you're in love with something, it's easy to kind of take it as an affront, but you also kind of have to stand back at the same time and look at it objectively and go, oh, okay, I see your point. Maybe it is an element you want to keep, but still kind of keep that in the back of your mind and say, maybe I'll revisit that at some point.
Yeah, we for the stuff that we work on, we actually do like prototypes and stuff and get it in front of our users and get player feedback. And we've had moments where people are like, I hate this thing. And there have been times where I'm sitting in the room with a designer, not sure how they're going to react, and there's been times where they're like, oh, okay, cool, and like they start planning a way to change it. And then I had my favorite one was I actually had a designer that was like, good, I want you to not like that feature, because then when you get the other thing, it's going to seem that much better. So like, there's also a certain level of intent in design and how you've approached things that, yes, take the feedback into consideration, and if there's a trend, definitely listen to it, but you can actually create something that's not supposed to be awesome for the sake of making the other thing that much more awesome, as like a counterbalance kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's always going to be something that you have to evaluate.
Yeah.
Actually look at it and take it for what it is.
Yeah.
Because you definitely don't want to change what makes you you and what you're putting towards it, but you also kind of need to listen at the same time.
Yeah. Cool.
So when you're on the job or when our students are on the job, how can they positively impact group interactions?
So we've got a phrase that we use at old company, Scientific Games. Don't poison the well. Don't be the person who's starting gossip or being a negative Nancy. Like, don't be a downer. Like, everybody has bad days, has off weeks. That happens. Everything ends though. Don't let that ruin you. Don't let that be the thing that brings you down. So there's that. But then, also, I think one of the most important things is to, view the people that you work with as a valuable human being, not somebody that's a coworker, but like another person whose time is important, who has a complex life and has as much nuance as you do. And once you start doing that and develop that level of empathy, I've tended to find that just the level of collaboration is a lot more successful and a lot more engaging, and we're able to move through problems more quickly as we address them and as we find them.
I would say listen. Like, take the time and listen to your teammates, because we often listen to talk. So we're only listening for the time it takes for that person to finish their sentence so we can say what we need to say. You need to listen actively to that person, hear what they're saying, compute it, analyze it, and then come back, but not just listen to answer. You actually need to listen to your teammates, because quite often they're making the same point that you're making, but you're making it in a different way. Mm-hmm. So just listen to what they're saying.
And I think, too, creating an environment, like a risk-free environment where you feel free and open to put forth ideas, and even if they're shot down. And I think that kind of environment really needs to be fostered from kind of the top down, from management down, because like Google did Project Aristotle or whatever, where they looked at what makes a good team work. And that was one of the factors that they found in their research consistently with teams at Google, was that just creating that environment where people felt comfortable throwing out ideas. Mm-hmm. And it was almost kind of like just a free-for-all brainstorming session. And then you kind of start narrowing things down from there. But encouraging people, like Laura said, listen, and I'll steal Billy's empathy idea. Just, open communication, a willingness to listen. And that, because that'll encourage even the more introverted people on your team to feel comfortable speaking up.
So we were talking about emotional intelligence recently back in the office. And so emotional intelligence is a thing for group work. If you're not into that yet, it's a really good thing to get into, because you can never be too emotionally intelligent. We can all be, a technician when needed, but in order to grow a business and in order to sell an idea, being able to connect with people is a really, really hard soft skill. And so servant-based leadership is really my thing, and how I meet my clients' needs and my students' needs. You can really never mess up serving somebody, because you're just there to help them get whatever it is they want. And there's so much room to negotiate in that.
Yeah, I'd actually love to pick your brain after the session about that stuff, because I'm going through and studying that and learning more about it right now, and I like dipped my toes in the water and realized that there is an ocean of knowledge on that topic. It is insane. Yeah.
Yes.
What are some conflict resolution techniques you recommend when a situation arises where you may see something differently from a group member or a client?
So for me personally, there's a few things. I like to assume that I'm the asshole in any social interaction where like it's starting to get heated. I'm like, what did I do wrong? And just taking that moment to kind of pause and be like, oh, you know what, man? That was rude. I'm sorry. And usually that fixes it if I really was the person that's at fault. When they're already super heated, and even if I was at fault and they're not ready for that apology yet, they want to be angry. I try to remind people that, like, look, we make games. This should be fun. Like, I'm sorry that I stepped on your toes or that I said that thing. I didn't mean to be a dick. My bad. And I'll speak openly like that in meetings and just like call myself out on stuff. But yeah, I think the more immediately you can address it, it tends to be better, especially if the most important thing to do in that is to try and remain calm, because like we have this thing with mirror neurons where we're going to match somebody else's intensity or somebody else's level, and if you're not calming yourself down and deliberately trying to take a deep breath and just cool off, they could end up just becoming, matching your intensity, and by calming yourself down, it may calm them down as well. I've also had stuff where, I've been in a meeting and I've had a designer and an engineer just arguing about something, and I had to remind people that, like, look, nobody wants to do a bad job. Like, we want to make a great game, and all we want to do is make a great game. Let's focus on that, and let's just get back to that. I've also had to pull people aside after meetings and been like, hey man, what's going on? Like, do you not want me in your studio? Like, what's happening? And then they're really apologetic and they're like, no, I'm sorry, like, it just came across the wrong way. So, again, treating somebody like a person and considering their feelings and their perspective, and that's why I like to assume fault of myself, is just that it's a much safer approach for trying to get to, a peaceful resolution of something that ultimately doesn't matter if it doesn't get the product out the door.
Oh, I like that approach. I wish all my counseling clients would admit fault. No, but I do like and agree with what you said about keeping the mission at hand, the goal in mind. Mm-hmm. We're here to make a game of really great games. Let's keep focused on that. A lot of conflict's normal, first of all. Just let's acknowledge that. A lot of people feel like conflict is a bad thing that we need to avoid. You can't avoid it. We're not all robots. We don't all think or feel the same. We all have our own thoughts and feelings and beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. That's what makes us human. That's what makes us great. But, a lot of times when conflict arises, it's because there's not a clear goal or vision. Mm-hmm. So I think if the team members, the group members know exactly what they're working towards, that can be a way to kind of harness the conflict towards a common goal, towards a common cause. Say, okay, I get that you think this part of it sucks or whatever, you don't like this, but how can we use that to get us to this, all right? Because at the end of the day, this is what we all want, right? In our classes, when they're working on group projects, their goal, first of all, is to get an A, right? Yeah, that's their main thing. Okay, just tell us how to get an A. And I'm like, no, I want you to go through the process of storming, forming, norming, all that stuff. But yeah, so at the end of the day is to get an A, but through that process, they inevitably discover something about themselves, about what they need to improve as far as how well I work with a group, what do I need to work on. But yes, at the end of the day, the goal for that team is to get this particular project or whatever task done. So keep that in mind and just know that you're all working towards that one goal. And a lot of times you'll find a common way to see your way through to that. So.
And I say acknowledge the conflict, acknowledge the person's, what they're feeling, what they're saying. Drawing from my 10 years of customer service for this one, you have to acknowledge. There's a lot of times when customers would call in and they were just irate for whatever reason. And as soon as I said, I understand, I completely understand, let me see what I can do for you, automatically it just kind of calmed them down because somebody heard them, somebody's listening to them, and somebody is willing to help them. So even in a group situation where you have somebody just going at it, there's obviously something there that they're trying to get out. Listen to what they're saying, acknowledge that, yes, okay, I see that you see this as a problem. Let's see where we can go and solve it instead of just making it a bigger problem. So be about the solution. So now that we acknowledge it, how can we solve it? Mm-hmm. Instead of just going off and both of you screaming and yelling at the same time, acknowledge, okay, I get it. Let's go on. Let's see what we can do.
I think my answer is going to be pretty short. I deal with a lot of people in conflict, and so generally that's like an invitation for let's both jump into it and see if we can have a thing to go out. So the thing is to acknowledge the obvious, and that's the same thing every time for me. I see you're having a hard time. Mm-hmm. What can I do to help you? Mm-hmm. And the burden is, I need to come fix this. And really allowing myself to not have that burden for them. Mm-hmm. The burden is to connect and to walk with them, not fix it for them. And so when it's conflict, management, it's how can I partner with this person to help them figure out how to resolve their issue, not me resolve it for them. So I see you're having a hard time. What can I do to help you?
Yeah.
It's doing all those things. It's acknowledging them and trying to partner with them.
Yeah, so I have a question about the acknowledging conflict thing. Rather than saying I understand, I've always, not always, I've recently approached it as well, help me understand why you're upset. Explain to me what's going on, and I want to understand your perspective. Does that work as well?
Yeah,
Or-
and
okay.
that's kind of where I was getting. It's when I meant acknowledge, it's acknowledge the fact that the person is upset.
Okay.
It's I get that you're upset. Now, what can we do? And especially if you can they've already yelled at you and screamed at you, and you can already kind of see where they're coming from. Usually that's where I got them. When I was in the customer service industry, is after they've already done their screaming and yelling, I was already 10 steps ahead of them, knowing what I need to get out of them to solve their problem, or help them solve their problem. And so, yeah, but if you're not sure where they're coming from and it's just the screaming, yeah, absolutely say, okay, I get that you're upset. Okay, can you tell me why? And I will be happy to do what I can and see what we can do to solve this.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and sometimes, if you don't truly understand, ask.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
assumptions, going back to my counseling, can you tell we're all counselors up here? Show empathy, be kind. No, but assumptions kill, this is good for relationships. Assumptions kill relationships, not just in your personal life, but in your work life as well, because you might assume something that is totally off base, or somebody might take it the wrong way and say, okay, you're telling me what I just did sucks. You're saying I suck. What do you want to kick me out of my studio or whatever? You said, you just don't want me around. So, and that wasn't at all what the crux of the situation was. So, don't always make assumptions that why the other person is mad or upset, right? It won't hurt anyone or anything to go up and say, okay, let's figure this out. What exactly you're upset about? How can we kind of move forward? And like Laura said, just that 5 seconds of disarming the other person can get you all sorts of benefits down the road.
And saying I understand that you're upset is different than saying I understand why, and understand how you feel, because we never know how somebody feels. We're never going to know that. But understanding that, yes, indeed, that you're upset, I acknowledge that. Now let's see where we can go. And that way we can solve the issue so that you're not upset anymore, and we can work this out and work together as a team and get this done. So, yeah, because if you say, I understand how you feel, sometimes that can escalate the situation.
Oh yeah, that could be
Because you don't.
patronizing.
You don't
know
understand.
how you
Sometimes
feel.
people don't know how they feel.
Yeah.
They haven't
That's
figured
it.
out all of the stuff about why they're having that, moment. There may be things that we can help them process through to figure out what it is they're feeling. So I can't say I know what you feel, because they may not know what they feel.
Yeah.
And that's actually a big part of emotional intelligence, is learning how to identify feelings, emotions, and learning how to sort of interpret the emotions of other people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is somebody angry? Are they disappointed?
Well, and that's why I actually I make a point to ask, help me understand your perspective. There's this thing called rubber ducky programming where you have somebody talk through what they're doing in their code, and then they're like, yeah, so I did this, and then I'm doing, and that's where I messed up. And so sometimes just having them speak aloud about what they're feeling and what they're processing helps them come to okay, well, I'm upset because, and then they try to explain it, and sometimes that'll be the thing that surfaces oh, this is why I'm upset. And you can be okay, cool, my bad, I can fix that. Or usually it's very fixable. And I always encourage resolving conflict at the lowest possible level. Usually it should be just between two people, and those two people should address it. Do we have more questions, or?
I think, do we have time for a few questions from the audience? Okay. At this time, we have time for one question. If you have one, please raise your hand, and a microphone will be brought to you.
Hey, how you doing? My
Hello,
name's
you.
Lito. I'm with the game design field. I hope to be a producer later on in my career, but I have a question. In game design, there are an awful lot of people who are introverted, and they keep to themselves quite a lot. I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how, first, to get them to open up, and then be in conflict resolution situations. Are there any tactics that work best with them, so that they don't retreat further inside their shell, so they actually come out and tell you their perspective, because sometimes they won't. Especially me, the beard and the face, I come off gruff or angry a lot of times when I have my serious face on, when I'm not actively smiling.
Yeah.
So, I'd appreciate any suggestions you might have.
So I would like to start with, you'd be surprised how mixed it is. That there's a decent balance of introversion and extroversion. That it's not 90% introverts, and even with that, just like I'm an introvert, but that doesn't mean that I don't like being social. It just means that I kind of restore my energy by like going home, laying on a bed, and putting a pillow over my face for like 5 minutes, and just like being in dark and quiet. And then I'm like, cool, I can keep going. I just find like light and noise to be exhausting. But that doesn't mean I don't like social interaction. The other thing with that too is there's a lot of I have to frequently like work with people that are quieter, that do sit, in the back of the room when we're doing a meeting or whatever. One of the things that I've picked up is I'll say, okay, is there anything else? And then I, in my head, count to 10. So that I can give them the time to, oh, you know what? Actually, there's this one thing that I wanted to bring up. Because maybe they just, they don't feel comfortable stepping on somebody else's toes, and they want to let everybody else go first. And it might just be that they're excessively polite. I also, at the end of our meetings, I take down all the notes and I email that stuff out so that, some people don't feel comfortable speaking up in a social setting like that, and that gives them an opportunity to comment on something in an email chain, so that, their input can be gained, and we can move forward with, adding that to the project. Yeah.
Thank you so much for attending our session today, everyone. And we especially want to thank our guests, Aaron,
Yeah.
Anne, Laura, and Billy, for their knowledge.
Hi, guys.